Look at this moment. A worker is high on a scaffold, mid-stride, and his boot loses grip. In an instant, gravity is about to take over. For decades, the standard approach to preventing a moment like this was to look at the worker and say, "You should have been more careful." This slide details Heinrich's Domino Theory, which dominated early safety programs. It explicitly directed investigators to focus on the unsafe act, or human error, immediately preceding an incident. It operated on the assumption that fixing human behavior was the primary way to stop accidents. The problem with relying on human perfection is that human attention drops, fatigue sets in, and complex environments demand more focus than the brain can sustain for a 10-hour shift. If your entire safety protocol relies on a person never making a mistake, the protocol is broken. Investigating an injury by simply placing blame on the worker prevents us from engineering reliable, repeatable defenses. It reduces safety management to crossing our fingers and hoping for good luck. This outlines a crucial shift proposed by Dr. William Haddon Jr. in the late 1960s. He argued we must stop treating accidents as moral or behavioral failures and instead analyze them as strict physical engineering problems. Haddon developed the energy release theory. He determined that physical harm only happens under one specific condition: when an uncontrolled transfer of energy hits a living body in an amount or at a rate that exceeds its biological tolerance. There are 5 forms of physical energy capable of causing injury: thermal, chemical, electrical, ionizing radiation, and mechanical or kinetic energy. In the case of our frozen worker falling from the scaffold, kinetic energy is the active threat. We cannot rewire human nature to eliminate fatigue or distraction. We can, however, design systems to isolate, control, or absorb raw energy before it reaches the human body. To map out exactly where and how we can control that energy, Haddon created a tool known as the Haddon matrix. It allows us to break down a chaotic, split-second incident into manageable, isolated variables. Across the top, we map the timeline of the incident into 3 phases. There are interventions we can make in the pre-event phase, the exact moment of the event, and the post-event aftermath. Down the side, we evaluate 4 distinct factors at each phase of time: the human involved, the agent, which is the energy source, the physical environment, and the social or economic environment, like company policies. By intersecting these timelines and factors, a sudden tragedy is transformed into a clear grid. It reveals up to 12 specific points where an intervention could stop the energy transfer and save a life. Let's apply this to our frozen scenario. Time inches forward. The worker's boot makes contact with a wet spot on the metal decking. Gravity prepares to pull a 200-pound mass toward the ground. Looking at the pre-event phase of the matrix, we can assess the human factor by asking if the worker was adequately trained to spot hazards. For the agent factor, we examine the source of the kinetic energy. Is the scaffolding stable, or does it wobble and invite a fall? Moving to the physical environment row, we look for physical interventions that keep the fall from happening. This includes installing rigid guardrails or applying high-friction, non-slip coatings to the walking surface. The entire focus of the pre-event phase is to eliminate the hazard entirely. If we can stop the kinetic energy from ever being marshaled, the workers stay safe, regardless of whether they lose their footing. Now the slip happens. The worker falls off the edge. Gravity accelerates the body downward, increasing the kinetic energy according to the equation 1/2 mass times velocity squared. The energy is growing exponentially. This graph illustrates the force of that growing energy inside the event agent cell of the matrix. If the worker is wearing a shock-absorbing lanyard, the fabric tears in a controlled manner as it pulls taut, stretching out the deceleration time and flattening the force curve to a survivable level. In that same split-second event phase, the physical environment can also intervene. A properly rigged safety net below the scaffold acts as a mechanical barrier, interposing itself between the falling body and the solid concrete ground. Once the worker is in freefall, behavioral training is entirely useless. In the event phase, survival is dictated exclusively by raw physics and the mechanical barriers we engineered into the system beforehand. The lanyard catches. The kinetic energy has been successfully absorbed without shattering bones. But the worker is now hanging in midair, and the pressure from the harness straps begins cutting off blood flow, inducing severe suspension trauma. This brings us to the post-event phase. Here, human factors involve the surrounding crew having immediate first aid skills. The social and economic factors determine whether the company invested in a rapid rescue plan and specialized equipment to retrieve the suspended worker within minutes. Surviving the initial physical impact means little if the emergency response fails. The post-event phase is the absolute final line of defense against permanent disability or death. Because the Haddon matrix originated in the realm of public health and epidemiology for auto crashes, some safety professionals critique it. They point out that a flat, two-dimensional grid can feel a bit static and linear when trying to map out the highly dynamic, unpredictable nature of a modern construction site. To solve this, safety engineers often pair the matrix with the Swiss cheese model. This approach visualizes the grid as multiple stacked layers of defense, recognizing that complex organizational failures happen when the holes in these overlapping layers align perfectly. Even with its linear origins, the matrix provides a rock-solid taxonomy. It forces safety teams to stop looking at an incident as an unsolvable blur, and instead break complex failures down into isolated, manageable equations. If you read through modern OSHA standards today, from machine guarding interlocks to fall protection requirements, you are essentially reading Haddon's energy release theory and the matrix codified into federal law. The true utility of the matrix is its ability to turn vague warnings like "be careful" into targeted physical controls. It builds a forgiving environment that anticipates human fallibility. World-class safety does not rely on a workforce that never makes mistakes. It relies on engineering the control of energy, guaranteeing that when the inevitable human mistakes do happen, they do not result in a loss of life. Take a moment to sketch out a blank Haddon matrix for the most critical hazard in your workplace and see what gaps you discover. And to master OSHA rules and better protect your teams, make sure to subscribe to HSE Study.